Hey guys, welcome back to Junk Wax America, where we're talking about the 1984 Topps Tigers team set. This is part 2, and we're going to get started with Marty Castillo. So Castillo was backup catcher, backup third baseman. Really one of these guys that was moved in and out of the hot corner while Tigers were trying to find someone permanent for that position. And based on the fact that this guy spent his career below the Mendoza line as a career 190 hitter, obviously he was not the permanent solution that the club was looking for. However, he really kind of caught fire in August and September of the '84 season, just as Howard Johnson was starting to struggle at the plate, and so he kind of really locked down the third base position heading into the postseason, and became really the unlikeliest of postseason heroes. He had the game-winning RBI in Game 3 of the ALCS to clinch the American League pennant, and later on actually hit the game-winning home run in Game 3 of the World Series. And so one of these guys who sort of answered the call when history presented him with an opportunity, and wrote his name into the record books. And so his lack of production obviously dogged him, and he was later released by the Tigers in 1986, which was ended up being his last season in pro baseball. But for a moment in time there in '84, Marty Castillo was a team hero, and so he deserves his place in the record book. Next up is Larry Herndon, and Herndon had a sensational 1983 season. I mean, this guy hit 20 home runs in '83. Certainly came into the '84 season as sort of a centerpiece in the Tigers lineup, and was really one of the few guys who faltered badly in the early part of the '84 season while the team was tearing through the American League. Herndon really struggled, and after a 20 home run season in '83, he actually only had one home run going into August of '84, and that was not down to injuries, but just his own slumping and lack of production. So he had a tough time of it early in the year, but really heated up down the stretch and was outstanding in the postseason. Hit 2 home runs in October for the Tigers, including the game-winning home run in Game 1 of the World Series, which was the one game that the Tigers won in San Diego. His other claim to fame in terms of the World Series is the fact that he caught the last out of Game 5 to clinch the series. And so Larry Herndon's catch is the one you see in all of the flashbacks to the end of that '84 season. Herndon actually ended up spending 7 years in Detroit, so he was quite a big part of the club in the '80s, and a mainstay, and is still involved with the organization. He's now a hitting coach in Lakeland, so good to have a guy like that still involved in the club. Glenn Abbott is an interesting guy. He's for one thing, 6'6", 200 pounds. I mean, this guy was just a really big, tall, lanky guy, and came over to the Tigers from Seattle. The Tigers purchased him from the Mariners in August of '83 and slotted him straight into the rotation, and he had a hell of an end to '83. Between August and September, he compiled a 1.93 ERA in 7 starts, and so it really looked like in '84 he could be a nice little piece of the Tigers pitching staff. unfortunately, he added 4 runs to that ERA in 1984 and was really ineffectual. Tigers sent him down after some spot starts and some long relief appearances. They sent him down in June. And he came back from Evansville in July when they were desperate for some starting pitching and was really just shelled. He had 5 starts since his return, after his return in July, and was really pounded in 4 of those starts, and the Tigers ended up releasing him on August 14th of 1984. So, unfortunately for Glenn, he was not part of the run-in to the 84 division clincher and, of course, the postseason. But at any rate, he still got his World Series share, and he still got a ring at the end of the season. So, still a positive experience, I would imagine, for Mr. Abbott. Next is Dave Gumpert, and he's another Michigan guy, South Haven native, went to Aquinas College, and he came up in '82 for his, I guess, first cup of coffee with the club, and the following season he was really quite an effective guy out of the Tigers bullpen. He appeared in 26 games in 1983, and so maybe would have thought that he'd go into the '84 season with a good chance of being one of the arms out of the bullpen, and very nearly was. He was one of the last cuts in spring training of '84. Almost made the team, but ended up being optioned to Evansville, and he had a tough time in Evansville in '84 and never really was knocking at the door of the big league club. So he kind of struggled through a tough '84 season. In spring of '85, before camp broke at the end of spring training, he was actually released, and then kind of spent the next 3 seasons bouncing between AAA and the bigs in the Cubs and Royals organization. So one of these guys, again, on the periphery of the big league team in '84, and unfortunately for Gumpert, just never really was able to crack in to that historic season. Sweet Lou Whitaker, All-Star card. So '83 was a landmark year for Lou. Apart from the fact that he was sporting one of the dodgier haircuts in club history in 1983, everything else went swimmingly for him. It was his first All-Star Game appearance. He'd go on to make 5 straight All-Star Game appearances. He won the Gold Glove. He won the Silver Slugger. He finished 8th in the MVP voting. And really, '83 was Whitaker's best season in a Detroit Tigers uniform. So really a breakout season for Lou. And he was one of 3 All-Stars that season in '83. We talked about Lopez already, but Lance Parrish was also an All-Star in '83. The Tigers doubled their representation at the '84 All-Star Game. Of course, Lou was back, as was Parrish, and then Alan Trammell, Lemon, Morris, and Willie Hernandez. So Tigers sent 6 to the All-Star Game in '84, but certainly '83, fantastic year for Lou, and this following season wasn't too bad either with the World Championship. Rick Leach is another real interesting character in terms of the history and the background of the '84 team. Leach was another Michigan guy, a Flint native in this case, and of course he had a very decorated career as the University of Michigan quarterback, and so just an all-around great athlete. He chose baseball, though. The Tigers drafted him in the first round of the 1979 amateur draft, and he ended up making his major league debut 2 years later in 1981, but really never got healthy. I mean, he battled injuries early in his major league career. He could never really, as a result of that, lock down a starting role, and so kind of became a platoon player at first and also in the outfield, and just never really locked down that regular place. Of course, Darrell Evans was signed in the offseason between the 83 and 84 season, and the Tigers eventually traded for Bergman. So Rick Leach sort of became surplus to requirements, and the Tigers really couldn't find any trading partner with him, and so as a result, at the end of the 84 spring training campaign, he was released and was really pretty bitter about it. He didn't his move was a little bit more acrimonious than John Walkenfuss's, and really didn't feel like he was given a chance by the Tigers and a fair shake. But anyway, he actually caught on, signed with Toronto in 84. Good move for him, I think, not only because Toronto was still fairly local, but the Blue Jays were really the Tigers' main competitors in the AL East that year, had a great year of their own. Pushed the Tigers to some degree throughout a big part of the summer after the Tigers had jumped out to such a great lead in the division, and so he was a part of a winning team, obviously. Funny thing, he actually pitched. He made a pitching appearance for the Jays in 84, and so he was able to use his arm again for the first time since his U of M days. So anyway, an interesting 84 season for Leach, and then he went on to spend parts of the next 7 seasons in the big leagues, mainly as a utility guy, but carved out an okay big league career for himself. Next up is Dave Rosmah, and Rosmah is yet another Michigan guy. There were a lot of them on this team, and Rosmah was from Grand Rapids. Had a sensational rookie season for the Tigers in 1977, and unfortunately just never really fulfilled the promise of that season. But nevertheless, he was a serviceable arm in 84, and really was a decent arm out of the rotation in the early 80s, and so didn't have a bad career at all with the Tigers. He was mainly plagued by injuries, and most of those were self-inflicted. I think there's one of the stories was a bar incident where he fell on his backside and had some glass in his pocket and ended up carving himself up pretty good. And then the most infamous is during a melee on the mound. He ran out to the mound and injured himself trying to karate kick somebody, and so really kind of some fairly stupid self-inflicted injuries hampered Rosmah's career, but he was relatively injury-free in 84 and was a guy that they relied on as a 5th starter. He made 16 starts and made 13 appearances out of the bullpen, so a guy they went to fairly regularly. Not a guy with overpowering stuff. He kind of a junk ball pitcher and relied on his control, which was pretty good. Eventually, he did, after the 84 season, he did leave the Tigers as a free agent in December of that year, and he joined the Rangers, where his pro career just kind of petered out from there. So certainly his best years were as a Tiger, and his 84 season was the capstone to that. Enos Cabal is another guy for the 83 team that's pretty interesting. So Cabal was really Rick Leach's platoon partner in 82 and 83. He also played some third base, so he got some time at both corners of the infield. Really had a terrible 82 season in Detroit, which was his first one with the Tigers. But he rebounded pretty nicely in 83 and actually hit 311. Was his best pro career, and was quite a productive member of that team. Tigers granted him free agency in November of 83, and he, there was some indication that they might bring him back. That the club ended up going with Darrell Evans, who was seen as a clear upgrade and who could play third and first, obviously. Cabal ended up signing with Houston in February of 84, so again, another guy who never appeared as, or was never a part of the organization in calendar year 1984, but at the very least was a free agent on the first of the year. So another one of these strange inclusions in the 84 team set. But anyway, he did have a solid season with Houston after signing with them in February of 84, and I think made a postseason appearance with them a couple years later. So another interesting guy sort of on the fringes of that 84 squad. Of course, now we got Alan Trammell, and anybody who's seen my first video on YouTube knows that Tram was my favorite player growing up, and the 84 team, for as good as it was, and for the lack of maybe a real clear-cut superstar on the team. I mean, comparing him to the current Tigers, for instance, there was no sort of Miguel Cabrera or Justin Verlander, but the team was just so deep and so, 1 through 9 in the lineup, so deep. The staff and the bullpen, again, really solid. There were very, very few weaknesses with the 84 team, but if there was a standout star, it was certainly Trammell. I mean, I think he was the best player in that 84 team, which was recognized with an all-star game appearance, although I don't think he played in that all-star game in 84. Gold Glove winner, finished 9th in the MVP voting that season, and really started the year out on a tear, hit 403 in April, and was one of the guys who was leading the Tigers in a big way to their 35-5 start. He slowed down mid-season and was really hampered with an arm injury that kept him out of the team in July. When he came back in August, he was really mainly utilized as a DH, actually, and so that's where Brookins got some of his appearances at short, and they even brought up Doug Baker from Evansville. But eventually Tram was back in the lineup as shortstop for the last couple months of the season, and just had a sensational postseason. He hit 419 with 3 home runs, and of course his greatest and most famous postseason game was Game 4 of the World Series in Tiger Stadium, where he hit 2 home runs off Eric Schau and almost hit a third one to tie the World Series record. He flied out almost to the warning track, but at any rate, Trammell certainly one of the best player on the Tigers in 1984, and one of the best players across all of baseball. Doug Bear. Bear was a veteran right-handed arm out of the bullpen. He came to the Tigers in 1983 in a trade from the Cardinals, and actually was a free agent after the 83 season, but re-upped with the Tigers. And this is a guy from who played for Sparky back in his Reds days. And he was really a go-to guy. I mean, he racked up 93 2/3 innings pitched for the Tigers in 84, and that was third for bullpen innings behind just or innings by by relievers behind Hernandez and Lopez. So really he was third on the depth chart, you might say, in terms of go-to relievers. He actually got a spot start in July against the Rangers so that Jack Morris could pitch in the All-Star game, which you would never see nowadays. But I was just reading part of Bless You Boys where Sparky said that sometimes you got to make sacrifices for the good of the game, and he was willing to skip Morris so that Morris could pitch in the All-Star game. So I thought that was interesting. Bear was not the Doug Bear starting pitching experiment was not so successful. He was hammered in that game against the Rangers, but at any rate, an effective reliever. He did face one batter in the World Series. It was in the 7th inning of Game 2, the one game they actually lost to San Diego, and he got his one batter out and a strike him out, throw him out. So brief appearance, but pretty effective from Doug's standpoint. And the 85 season was a little rockier for Bear, and the Tigers actually released him mid-season. But he did play 5 more seasons in the big leagues before retiring at age 40, so carved out a pretty decent career for himself. Glenn Wilson. So Glenn Wilson's a real interesting guy. Obviously was one half of what the Tigers sent away in the famous Hernandez-Bergman trade, along with John Walkenfuss. And Wilson had maybe not as long a history with the Tigers as Walkenfuss, but he was another first-round draft pick in the 1980 amateur draft, and he broke in really in 1982 and had a great season. Was the Tigers' team rookie of the year. Had a real promising start and kind of hit the skids a little bit in 1983 as the Tigers' primary right fielder. I mean, at that time, Gibson was still struggling with injury and was not looked on or relied upon as an everyday guy. And Wilson was, for all intents and purposes, a starting right fielder. He hit 11 home runs, but never really produced like he had the year before. Sparky really believed in Kirk Gibson, though, and so the following season, Wilson was sort of seen as potential trade bait, and so he was sent to Philadelphia along with Walkenfuss in the famous trade. Now, unlike Walkenfuss, Glenn Wilson was pretty actually positive about the Hernandez trade. He was pretty happy to be leaving the organization, thought he could get a fresh start, and of course, remember the Phillies had won the National League in 1983, so he was going to a ready-made contender and was pretty satisfied with how the trade had worked out. And so he went to Philadelphia, where he was really abysmal in '84. Did not play well at all, and Sparky claimed during the season that Barbaro Garbe was going to be a far superior hitter to Glenn Wilson, and so was, I think, feeling fairly smug about the way the trade went, and rightly so, because the pieces that the Tigers got in return were incredible. He wasn't right about that, though. Glenn Wilson spent parts of the next 7 seasons as kind of a journeyman outfielder and carved out a decent enough major league career for himself, while Garbe never really did much after the '84 season. So anyway, that's Glenn Wilson's story. Last card for part 2 of this video is Milt Wilcox, and this guy was, a real long time inning eating workhorse out of the starting rotation. A veteran guy. He came over from the Cubs in 1976 and was really a reliable starter every 4th or 5th day for the Tigers. A guy that they could rely on for 8 seasons. he had been granted free agency in November of '83, actually, after the '83 season, and it was believed that the Tigers were going to look elsewhere for starting pitching help, and that Wilcox's days as a Tiger were effectively over. But they ended up re-signing him in December of '83, and so he came back. He was another one of Sparky's guys from his Cincinnati days, and Sparky really believed that this guy broke out in '84. He talks a lot about, and bless you boys, about how this was the season that Wilcox dug deep and believed in himself and really fulfilled the promise that he had shown in previous seasons, and that his career high 17 wins really reflected that breakout season. It's not really true. Wilcox was pretty average in 1984. I mean, again, he's a guy that you can rely on to take the hill and eat innings, but his wins were really racked up on the back of 18 starts in which he received 6 or more runs of support from his lineup. So any pitcher would kill for that, and it's certainly not a knock on the guy. He'd take that run support all day long, but Wilcox certainly had better seasons than '84. It's just that he was the beneficiary of some real good run support that season, which is not to take anything away, certainly, from his postseason. He was outstanding in the postseason. He won Game 3. Tigers went to a 3-man rotation in the postseason. Wilcox was given the nod over certainly Rosmah, but even Baron Gare, who was arguably more effective. And he was outstanding in Game 3 of the ALCS and Game 3 of the World Series. He won both of those starts and allowed just 1 run in 14 innings pitched. So really had a great October for the team, and it was really a great send-off from the standpoint that it was his last season as a Tiger, who was as a member of a squad that he could really contribute to. '85, he was really hampered by injuries and was just not good at all. The following season, he was hurt a lot and just not effective, and so that ended up being his last season in Detroit, the '85 season. But certainly '84 was a nice enough send-off for Milt Wilcox after a better part of a decade spent in the Tigers uniform. So thanks everybody for watching. That was part 2, and stay tuned for the conclusion of the 1984 Topps Tigers team set. And we'll talk to you later.